Welcome to week 2. We are already underway in terms of learning for assignment number 1, which is worth 30%, due in just a few weeks. So firstly, let me say, a lot of people ask me questions about reports. The report examples or guides that you find on your link from your assignment sheets. Don't be bamboozled by it. Really what it wants to show you is an example. You don't have to copy exactly the headings. For example, a business report and certainly a psychology report would be a little bit offbeat in terms of applying that to conflict resolution. But what it does want to show you is that it's different to the flow of an essay. So you're going to be using subheadings. You typically do have an executive summary, a table of contents, an introduction, subheadings that relate to what this particular report is asking you. So you look at your report instructions, what are you putting in the report? And then it's a little bit more descriptive in what you put under each section. So we're looking at, origins, actors and sources of conflict, but like I said, you might vary your subheadings a little bit depending on how that applies to one of the 5 case studies that you choose. And then typically you would have a heading called conclusion, which is your wrap up of everything, and then at the end you would have your reference list. So essentially that's what's going into your report. There will also be a collaborate session that I've announced for next week. So definitely come along and I'll go into more detail, but the slides are also posted and it will be recorded. But anyway, week 2 is really important. So it's talking about the origins of conflict and what type of conflict. Now the word origins, think about it in terms of the root of the word originate. So, I come home, my kids are in an all-out brawl. Where did this start? What happened? So yes, they will touch on the sources and tell me maybe it was someone had an inch more of water in their cup than someone else or whatever it might be, or, an iPad that they're arguing about. But it's more than that. They'll also tell me who was involved. They'll start telling me what happened. They'll probably start telling me when it happened. They might even tell me about something that happened 2 years ago that actually impacted the conflict today. You get the idea. So I'm just drawing on an example that might be close to some people's homes, not mine, of course. And then just saying that in international conflict, when we're looking at origins, we're telling a story. What happened? When did it happen? So we're trying to describe the conflict and the violence. So this is where typically you have a little bit of your background, a bit of your history. I'm coming in, I don't know anything. Where did it originate? Tell me about the origins of the conflict I'm seeing today. What's some of the history? What happened? Who was involved? Now, also when it comes to origins, what's really useful is a description of the types of violence. Now, this is where week 2 learning is really critical. So we've got a few models there. Firstly, is it one-sided violence? Is it direct violence? So there's a few descriptions that we have in week 2 that will help you describe it in a way that's meaningful to the field of conflict resolution. So we're asking you to draw on what scholars are saying from this field, not just a description in your own words. Start to get used to the concepts that we're teaching. So what type of violence is it? And then we come to a few models. So for example, Correlates of War says if there's 1,000 or so deaths at least, then it's classified as a war. Okay, so that's one way. So you can't just call it a war because you say it's a war. What measure are you using? Then there is an Uppsala Index which says 25 deaths or more around an incident is a violent conflict. And if you go into that material around the Uppsala data project this week and you click on different conflicts, it'll actually start to drill down and show you some of the key actors in the conflict, who's involved, and a little bit more description around the origins and the history of it as well. And then another model other than Correlates of War and Uppsala is greed or grievance. And what this is saying is the conflict simply a case of someone's being greedy? So it's about financing of a war and who benefits from it. And really there is no other source of, if there was no money involved, if there was no financial monetary benefit, then you wouldn't have the conflict in all likelihood. Or is it actually grievance, which usually comes down to what we're going to look at next week in more detail, sources of conflict, things like, religious divide, ethnic divide, those sorts of things are sources of conflict. So greed or grievance model. So this week when you're looking at origins, I encourage you to think in terms of providing a background of your conflict, where it really started. Was it centuries ago? What is those sorts of main causes? what happened and how you would actually describe the type of fighting and violence it is. Now, when you write up your reports, you'll be thinking of some meaningful subheadings yourself. You might have one called Origins, but you'll find it does overlap with sources and actors of conflict as well. So you might put your own subheadings in that are meaningful for your particular case. So that's okay. You're able to use subheadings as you see fit. So like I said, the report design is to simply show you that you categorize chunks of information in a descriptive way so that at the end of it all, I can get a feeling of what the conflict looks like, what its origins are, who the actors were, and what the sources were. Now, just one other point I'm going to cover right now up front on actors, and I will be reiterating it. Picking your main actors in the conflict, you want to narrow them a little bit. I don't want to see a list of 20. You can often categorize them. There might be international organizations might be an actor, often the key countries or governments. There might be paramilitary. So try and think of a list of, up to 5, say, but I would work on categorizing them. Ask me if you're having trouble. Your scholars will have categorized them, you'll find, when you're doing your research. So take that as a clue. But what I don't want is just a list of this is what they did. They killed this many people from this group, for example. That's not meaningful to me. What's meaningful is this is their claims, this is why, this is their motives that were involved, and this is how they contributed to the conflict. So that's why we don't want too many categories, because when it comes to your reports, we'll be looking for meaningful information. So I hope this helps. You will, of course, have to have a good look at your assignment instructions. Choose a case study and then start reading, particularly weeks 2 through to 4, or 2 and 3 particularly, are really going to be helpful, useful weeks in terms of doing that assignment number 1. And of course, keep talking here on discussion board, attend the Collaborate session, email me a plan. But please, I really prefer students actually do a little bit of reading and get up on what the instructions are and some reading around it before they start to ask me questions, because otherwise the answers I'm going to give you is going to assume you've at least done some of that as a minimum, and so you won't understand, or possibly my response will be even more confusing if you don't have a good look at the very least those instructions and modules to start with. So thank you everybody, and I look forward to hearing from you on the discussion posts.